in 1988 was genocide and was appalling. This country, to its shame, continued selling arms to Iraq and indeed took part in the Baghdad arms fair less than a year later and continued supplying weaponry to Iraq, which could and may well have been used against the Kurdish people in their continuing oppression.
Well, as I said earlier in my opening remarks, and I thank him for his intervention, that the Saddam Hussein spin machine, all the instruments of power that were available to him, including a number of people who lobbied very hard, this Parliament and the government of the time, to continue to do business with Saddam. But I have to, at this point, then recognise John Major in his contribution to safeguarding the Kurds in 1991 when Saddam used his helicopter gunships to attack the Kurdish people post the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, where this government and this country decided to place a no-fly zone to protect the Kurdish people as well as the people of the south of Iraq, the Shias of Iraq, who were coming under a similar attack. I will give way.
I congratulate the honourable gentleman on getting the debate today, but does he not see what he said today and what he's asking for as a step for justice for the Kurdish people across the Middle East? Because various countries of the Middle East have been mentioned, for example Turkey. The way I see it, the honourable gentleman has done quite a service today if it starts, to use an expression, the ball rolling for justice for the Kurdish people across the Middle East, but in particular Turkey.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. I think that if we can send a clear message today that we recognise what took place in Iraq as genocide against the Kurdish people, it will send a clear message, as I, in my response earlier, said to all those leaders of those countries in the region that they cannot, or they certainly should think twice before they decide to attack their own people, as we're seeing currently in Syria. Indeed, we know that today there's a conference in Rome where the Foreign Secretary is taking part to try and see what more we can do to safeguard the welfare of the Syrian people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would just returning to my earlier remarks, I am truly proud that Britain is at the forefront of the international community when it comes to protecting human rights. So recognising the Kurdish persecution as genocide will send a strong message to those totalitarian regimes around the world who may consider committing such acts. After all, history has shown us that when a dictator thinks they will get away with it, they will commit atrocities against their own people. We need only turn our gaze to Syria to remind ourselves of that. It is only by raising international awareness of these crimes that we will educate people against the intolerance and hatred that led to these heinous acts. It is only by providing the perpetrators of these crimes, by proving that the perpetrators of these crimes can and will be brought to justice, that we will make the dictators of this world think before they act. It is through the recognition of the Kurdish genocide that we can ensure these aims and that the British nation can cement its position as a protector of liberty and human rights. I commend this motion to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper. Megna.
Indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I refer to my entries in the Register of Members' Interests. It is an honour to speak in this important debate. Over the last 5 years, I have been involved with the Kurdistan region of Iraq all-party parliamentary group, which I am now proud to co-chair with my honourable friend, the member for Stratford-on-Avon, who has eloquently set out the reason for this debate. I should mention, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the all-party group is very active and has an excellent website with a range of views and news, and members can look at the issues around Kurdistan and look at the issues relating to this debate on that website at www.appgkurdistan.org.uk. Genocide, as my honourable friend has said, is the methodical killing of all the people from a particular national, ethnic or religious group. Today's debate is an important milestone towards persuading this House, the wider public and the international community to recognise the attempted genocide in Iraq of the Kurdish people by Saddam Hussein. As my honourable friend for Stratford has already said, an estimated 1 million Iraqis have disappeared since the 1960s, all presumed murdered by the regime. And as this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Anfal genocide operation against the Kurds, including the dreadful chemical attack on Halabja, as well as the 30th anniversary of the killing of 8,000 male members of the Bazani clan, the scale of these atrocities is clear and not seriously challenged. But few outside of the Kurdistan region understand what was involved in the mass slaughter, and fewer still understand the organisation and methods used in what has been described as Saddam's killing machine. It has been referred to as a prison above ground and a mass grave beneath. The targeting of the Kurdish people living in northern Iraq was designed to remove any possibility of opposition to the vile regime. Last night I watched again 2 DVDs which have been produced by the Iraqi Ministry of Human Rights about the terrible crimes committed by Saddam Hussein's regime, execution of people and dust talks. They include pictures of some of the atrocities filmed by the regime: shootings and beatings, the severing of ears of young men who had deserted the army. They show the devastation of the way of life of the marsh Arabs by the deliberate draining of the marshes, and of course the chemical attacks at Halabja and elsewhere. Today we only have words to try and describe what happened, and I fear they will fall short of portraying the full horror. These monstrous events have a contemporary relevance. Many families still do not know if a father, brother, sister is dead or not, do not know where their body may be buried, perhaps in some undiscovered mass grave. Not knowing about the fate of a member of the family weighs heavy. The impact of the killing continues and will continue for many, many years to come. It's important to remember just how closed and controlled a society Iraq was. There were few opportunities for contact with the outside world. After the no-fly zone was imposed over Kurdistan in 1991, the people had at last the opportunity to begin to develop their own democracy, to make their own decisions. But sustained contact with the outside world only really began after the 2003 invasion. And it was only then that we slowly began to understand the true scale of the horror. According to the International Commission on Missing Persons, in 2006, there were 270 mass graves, each estimated to contain between 10 bodies to 10,000 bodies. Since then, there have been many, many more mass graves uncovered. Of course, it was not just the Kurds who suffered under Saddam Hussein. The impact of 35 years of dictatorship are still very evident in all sections of the Iraqi population. I have visited Iraq a number of times and have been privileged to meet the politicians who are building their democracy. Some have shared with me their experiences of that dark time. Family members killed, tortured, or simply missing. I know that the number of widows in the country is simply huge. In Kurdistan today, many children are affected with cancers caused by the chemical weapons. Others live with the effects of barbaric torture. 10 years after the fall of the dictator, the health services are far from adequate to meet the needs of this population. But they are improving. In the UK, we've benefited from the Iraqi doctors who came to work here during the time of exile. And it is encouraging to see that many have returned or are now working to improve health services in their home country. Indeed, it was an Iraqi doctor in Sheffield who began the process which has led to significant partnerships between Sheffield Hallam University and the Iraqi Ministry of Health and Iraqi universities to provide much-needed skills for the health service. And a strong partnership has also developed with the Kurdistan regional government. Alongside the physical impact...
Can I thank my honourable friend for giving way? Can I also raise the great support that's been given by the members of the Newcastle Gateshead Medical Volunteers led by Diari Kira, who, as well as the people from Sheffield, have been going across to Kurdistan for a number of years now, and next month it will be the 8th time they've gone across, and they are treating people every day when they're there. Thousands and thousands of people have benefited from the relationship we've developed between our two countries.
I thank my honourable friend for bringing that partnership to the attention of the House. It is very true that there are many doctors in the UK of Iraqi and Iraqi Kurdish origin, and while they've continued to serve and provide support for our community, they also are doing such things as he has described and are doing what they can at a time when the health services in Iraq still need a great deal of investment to develop to serve an ordinary population, let alone a population that has suffered the kind of trauma and torture and chemical attacks that have been suffered in Iraq and particularly in Kurdistan. Alongside the physical impact of repression on the population, we must not underestimate the psychological effects, living with the grief of lost family members, remembering the terror of attacks, and above all, the constant fear. And as a woman says in the DVD I mentioned earlier, Iraqi people had no dignity because they had to sell out their consciences to Saddam Hussein to stay alive. 35 years of dictatorship is not easily forgotten, but there are positive moments since the 2003 invasion. We remember the TV pictures of the purple-stained fingers shown with pride when they were able to exercise the right to vote, something we take for granted. The Iraqi people were excited about being able to take part in the first democratic elections, but voting is, of course, only the first act. Building the institutions and democratic habits are much more difficult. All the more difficult when you have not been allowed to make your own decisions, and acting on your own initiative was a risky thing to do. My involvement with the Kurdistan Regional and Iraqi National Parliaments has shown me just how difficult this task is. But it is a task to which many brave Iraqis are committed. To take on these tasks and build a new society is complex and demanding. It will take time, dedication and determination. We should continue to support them in this. An important way to do that is to formally recognise what happened to them. Former French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner argues that human rights should mean that people are protected within their own countries. When these rights are violated, it is the duty of the international community to honour victims and to ensure history cannot repeat itself. If democratic governments cannot be clear about genocide and say that such crimes must be stamped out, then who will?
Well, thank you very much. I thank her for giving way and very interesting points she's making. Does she also accept that there is a fairly systematic discrimination against Kurdish people, culture and language in all the neighbouring countries as well? And this is a product of the breakup of the Ottoman and the end of the First World War, and that all those countries have got to reckon with a multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic society if there's to be a long-term peace within the region.
Building the kind of society he describes, which recognises the rights of people to their own language, their own culture, and to celebrate their own background, is enormously important, and it is very much part of this process. And while the process of building the democracies in Iraq and working with Iraqi parliamentarians are difficult, what is encouraging is to see Iraqis across all political groups and backgrounds working together. Next week we will have the Services and Reconstruction Committee from the Iraqi Parliament visiting us here, which is actually chaired by a Kurdish Yazidi woman. They will be coming here and they will contain people from all backgrounds and with all differences together, working together to try and build things for the Iraqi people. So I agree with much of what the Honourable Gentleman says.
She mentions very eloquently the position in France and the position of the French Foreign Minister. Does she recall that just a few weeks ago 3 Kurdish women were shot dead in Paris? And it does convey the continued concern